She's like, you're a fucking loser. Yeah. She goes, you used to always have tons of friends. You'd have nice clothes. You'd have a good looking girlfriend. Yeah. She goes, you're a fucking loser now. No one wants to spend time with you. I'm getting choked up talking about it.
No. Welcome to another episode of the Powerless to Powerful Recovery podcast. My name is Jason. I'm an alcoholic and addict. As always, our mission is to share experience, strength, and hope across multiple media platforms. The story of addiction and the road to recovery. We're not affiliated with Alcoholics Anonymous or any other 12-step based organizations or groups in any way. And we are back, Ron. Another episode, the Doubleheader Wednesday. Is it Doubleheader Wednesday?
Here we go.
Sounds like Johnny in high school. But we are here and we are back with another episode, Ron. It's good to have you back. You know, you were out of town, bringing and contributing to the life of your father and your family. Prayers to your father. But we have an episode today.
Yes.
There's some words that we can't even say. There's some areas that we have to stay away from our history and our past. That's a trauma response from you and I with phone rooms and headsets. We're not even going to go there today. We're not. But we have Mike Cunningham on the show today. Let's welcome Mike to the show.
Welcome, Mike.
Mike, Hope and Healing Addiction Treatment Centers. They got RTC, PHP, IOP, Sober Living. We also have the CEO, one of the founders, the director of operation. I'm going to give him every single title. His partners are going to wonder what the hell is going on over here on the show today. But we have the man, the myth, the legend lives on, and Mike Cunningham is here. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
Knights of the Round Table. I mean, you guys building houses in Rocky Point this weekend? Next weekend.
Yeah,
next weekend. Oh yeah, look at Johnny. He hasn't been Thursday night in a while. He missed the announcements. But thanks for coming on the show today, sharing some time. Hope and healing. I really just want to start there before we get into your message of hope and the miracle and the transformation that you've experienced in your life, the same that Ron and I have as well. But first, let's, because that's the most important thing, is someone is dying every 3 to 4 minutes from this disease out there. It might even be less time than that. You can call it 5 minutes, whatever you want to call it. And the reason I say that, and my point is that we need each other. We're much stronger together. Desert Recovery Centers, Hope and Healing, whether it's the cornerstones, the crossroads, the guiding roads, whatever the case might be, together we're much stronger and we have the ability to help in such a great capacity. So again, welcome to the show. And if you could just take a few minutes just to give the cliff notes of Hope and Healing Addiction Treatment Centers, the levels of care, how we can find you, the demographics that you're looking for, and that way we can kind of get it all out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
This. Hope and Healing Addiction Treatment Centers. How you find us is azhopeandhealing.com. We have locations in Mesa, Phoenix, Scottsdale, and Surprise. Very spread out.
Sounds like the four corners of the world. It sounds like where our locations are at. Yeah. I got one in Scottsdale, one on the top of South Mountain, and one in Glendale. Yeah. It's not easy to get to any of those. Do you get gas mileage, brother? They pay for your gas?
I pay for it.
Yeah. We need to have a talk. Yeah. We need to have a talk with those other partners, brother. Yeah. But just talk a little bit about the levels of care, some outpatient, PHP. Yeah. Just talk a little bit about programming, what they could expect and how they can get in touch with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the levels of care that we offer is residential, PHP, IOP, and sober living. We have a veterans program. We work with military families. We have a lot of veteran staff. We also have some traditional, it's a native approach to treatment too. We do talking circles. We have a sweat lodge on site.
Awesome.
We do a lot of contracting with some of the tribes locally and out of state, and just really honored to talk about what we do, but at the same time to really get into the action of it,
Yeah, and I like that you brought that up, because being in the native space and everything that we've all been through, direct with all the companies we've been a part of, and just the whole entire industry in Arizona, the shakeup over the last 2 years, to really speak on connections with the tribes, to speak on providing real recovery with sobriety, with specifics to their heritage and their culture. Mm-hmm. What's the challenges? Just kind of talk about what the snapshot has been. Anyone who even had a single native in their care got a massive spotlight on them, right? Mm-hmm. And it really took an opportunity for all of us, which was the biggest blessing I think that we could all now today say that what's happened has been the biggest blessing for the whole entire industry, because it gave the bad actors a chance to get gone, and it gave the good actors and the ones who are in here for the right reason the ability to reset and to find a better approach that can work together with all the agencies of the community partners that we have. So why don't you just kind of talk about what it's been like, the challenges that you faced? Because right now there's such a need in the native space. We get calls all the time. There's only a couple different places, Hope and Healing being one of them, that we could even find a bed. So why don't you just share what that transition's been like, your experience over the last just couple years being on the front lines of it, and why it's just on your heart to help the native population?
Yeah, I mean, it really started with the story. There was a guy. So I've worked with some of the local tribes and some out-of-state tribes for a while, since like 2017, 2018. And specifically, there was a few guys from a tribe here locally that came in to treatment, and I really like helped them through that entire process of going through recovery. And what I found was, like, when this guy came in, one guy specifically, he came into treatment, did okay while he was in treatment, left, went back to the res, right back to using. Came in again, did okay in treatment, left, went right back to using. And then he called the third time, and on the third time, he comes into treatment. We get the referral from his tribe. He comes into treatment. He does great for the first, couple of weeks. And he's like, there's something missing. I've heard about this program called Wellbriety. And, he asked if he could get some literature and some material and a ride to a sweat lodge or, stuff like that.
Music to our ears.
Yeah. And so I'm like, I have no idea. What is that? And he's like, well, it's AA the Indian way. I'm like, oh, cool. All right.
Yeah.
I can vibe with that because I got sober in AA.
Yeah.
And, and so I asked the owner if we can get some materials, and he's like, well, if we're not getting reimbursed for it, we're not doing it. And so I went in my own pocket, spent my own money, bought him all the books, bought him all the stuff, found some Wellbriety sponsor for him, got him connected. And then all of a sudden it was like the fucking light kicked on.
Like, hold on, he was on to something.
Yeah.
That sounds familiar, Ron. When you bring a great idea and they think you're wrong or they don't want to listen to you, and you just go do it yourself and you just show them.
Yeah.
I love that, dude.
So
I love that.
Yeah. And then from then on, it was like,
they saw it.
Well, and I saw it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why is there no programs doing this? And there's one program specifically, NAC, that's been doing it for a long time. And I'm like, man, why does it take 3 weeks to get someone in this program? Like, so that's a lot of like what started that spark for me. And then just requests from the tribes that we had been working with, like, hey, we wish you would do more some of this stuff. And so that's really how the beginning of Hope and Healing was started.
Nice. And so how many beds total do you have?
We have 26 residential beds. Then we've got some sober livings with PHP and IOP.
So we got about 30 for 40 beds ish.
Yeah.
Ish. Okay. And so if someone wanted to reach out to you right away, is there a website? If someone's listening to you right now and they have that willingness and they have some, just a little glimmer of hope and they want to take some action, where can they go on right now if they wanted to get in touch with you?
Well, here's our phone number right here.
Yes.
Here's our website right there.
Matt, you got that, Matt? Phone number, website. 7.5 minutes in, up and down.
Yeah.
He's done this before.
But that's what we want. We want your phone number. We want
Absolutely.
the email address. We want them to be able to capitalize on their willingness. We want them to know whether it's you, whether it's us, whether it's corner. It doesn't matter what it is. We just want to see you find help.
And that's one of the biggest things, like, starting in this industry as admissions and being someone who's in recovery and really being passionate about what I do. Like, every single phone call that I take, like, it's someone that is desperate for help, not every person, but most of them are really wanting help. And it's like, especially for the guys that are calling, men and women that are calling for help, or family members, it's like, I go the extra mile to make sure that they get plugged in, so I work with a lot of community partners. I make sure that when someone wants the help, they get plugged into the help.
Yeah.
And it's not always with us. Very rarely is it with us, because there's only so many insurances we can take. There's only, there's
so many beds, so many circumstances. Yeah.
There's definitely barriers to treatment. So it's like, my goal has been to remove as many barriers as I possibly can. So that's why I'm really grateful to be here with you guys and just what you're doing with us.
Yeah, appreciate that. And that's the whole goal. Because you're right, Ron, it's about connection, right?
Sure.
And so when we talk about that connection, we talk about God wearing people clothes, everything is about connection. And if we, in that quick 2-minute phone call, 30-second phone call, 60-second phone call, a web submission on a form, we have such a short period of time to connect with them and show them that we actually care and that we're different than the other bad actors in the game. So can you share just briefly about connection, and why that's so important, how to really grab a hold of somebody's willingness in the beginning?
Sure, 100%, right? Like, we we are all connected. This is what I believe. We are all connectors, especially working in this industry, being byproducts of whatever you participated in, right? And for me, it went to a next level, believing that my evolution of the God concept, right? That I believe that God is love, and I believe God is in each and every one of us. And when I look for the God inside of you, and I look for that love inside of you, before I do, when I show you that love inside of me and that connection is made, it's magical. And it's the same thing when someone's reaching out for help. May it be on the phone and on an admissions line, or may it be in a meeting of the nights, or may it be in an AA meeting mid-afternoon, and you have that one brief moment where you're that example for somebody where they're going to say, yeah, I'm going to try it. It's my moral obligation to be practicing these principles in all my affairs, and that's how the connection happens. And when that connection does happen, some amazing things come from that. I'll tell you this thing real quick. So I do this thing every morning. I send out about 100 text messages individually to whoever happens to be in my phone. Some people have been on this chain for 4 years. And I send out a sober times message just randomly to people. And a lot of times I don't get responses back from people. I'm not looking for responses. I got a text message the other day from a gentleman who had recently relapsed. I shared this with Johnny. And he said, hey, brother, can I tell you something? And this guy had never responded back to me on one of these text messages. I don't even know how he got in my phone. And he said that he was in the middle of a relapse. He was at the hotel. He was getting ready to shoot up. And he had given up hope of recovery. And he gets this sober times message that he has gotten every morning for a while. And he said at that moment, he threw the stuff away. He walked out of the hotel room. He made the call. He went to detox. And he's a couple weeks sober now over a purpose.
Oh, yeah.
Connection, right? Ripple effect, connection. And that's what it's all about. You just never know.
I'm glad that you shared that story, because it's like, I have so many of those experiences to where it's like, man, how can there not be God?
Yeah.
How is God? Yeah. I mean, that connection, and even that feeling that I'm getting right now on the back of my neck, talking with you guys about this, like, that's God.
It's the evidence.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, and we talk about this all the time. We got to remind each other at all times, because when we decided in step 3 that we were going to make a decision to turn our will in our life, which is our thoughts and our actions, we're really deciding that from this moment on, I'm going to respond to life. And the way that I'm going to respond to life is in positive character traits. That is God. Right. And my 50% of that relationship is the action steps each day. And my higher power's 50% is the outcomes in my life. So in the beginning, in steps 1, 2, and 3, my first 30, 60, 90 year of recovery, I still have just a little bit of honesty and a little bit of hope and a little bit of faith, that hope that I could be restored to sanity, and faith that the outcomes are actually going to work out. Now, fast forward 7 years, over 13, 14 years, you got prison math, whatever that is. 12 years. Yeah. Ron just celebrated 11 years. Now we've all have data now for year upon year upon year. But when life happens and I perceive it to be negative, I immediately want to go back into negative outcomes. And I want to go back to my old program, which was identify a problem, make that problem worse. Right? Recovery teaches me problem, get to the solution. How quick can I get to the solution? Right? And so that honesty, hope, and faith is now turned into evidence, dude. But sometimes I need Ron to be like, dude, Jay, just keep doing your part of the 50-50 relationship. For the last 7 years, every single outcome in your life has worked out. Why would this one be any different? And I go, oh, shit. You're right. And then I get the tinglies, and the God says, hey, remember, you got the evidence. And I say, you're right. I'm going to do my part, right? And then the outcomes tend to work out. It doesn't matter what it is. I've collected evidence for 7 years, 11 years, 12 years. Sometimes we got to be reminded, though. But when we do our part, amazing, amazing things happen, right? And so every journey starts somewhere, though. I want to talk about your journey. I want to hear about how we got to this point, how we developed this passion to want to serve and help others, every demographic, every population, and make it literally our life's mission to help anybody day or night. But it takes a minute to get there. I call it building a resume, right? I got to build the resume, and it took me a few years, 2 decades to build that resume.
Your mom hates that.
Mom hates it. Florida, stand up, Jacksonville, Florida. And that was right there, dead center of the pain, that movie. What was it? What's the movie? The Pain Management with the pill mills.
Oh yeah.
It was right there. I mean, and And we're all from the same time period of the OC 80s, the pills and all that thing. So why don't you talk about, what it was like? You were born in Florida, but you grew up out here. You moved out here when you were young. So why don't you share a little bit about what it was like moving from Florida to Arizona, the family dynamics, so we can get a snapshot of what that looks like. And then we'll kind of take it from there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I grew up, born in Jacksonville, moved to Orlando when I was like 2 or 1 or something like that. And so I lived 20 minutes from Disney World. So on a Tuesday afternoon, I'd get done with school, when I think I was like kindergarten, I guess. Yeah. And I would get done with school, and my dad would just take me over to Disney World, and we'd go ride a bunch of rides, and,
Awesome.
and just this amazing, imagine being a 6-year-old kid, being able to go to Disneyland
Whenever
20
you
times
want.
a year
Yeah.
or 30 times a year, or whatever it was, because we had season tickets. Yeah. My dad he traveled a lot, but when he was home, he was home. But when he was gone, he would always bring back, we had a good relationship early on. And, he'd bring him back. We'd call it a special treat. I'm like, where's my special treat? And it'd be like some, sword or whatever it was. Right. And, so that's what it was like early on. I moved when I was like 7, I don't know, in 1997, to Arizona. My dad got a job out here. He ran big landscaping companies, like the ones that do like the freeways and, like big companies.
Like ADOT type stuff.
Yeah. And big resort installs and stuff like that. And so moved out here, started school, and normal in my opinion,
normal, right?
normal,
pretty
very
normal, right?
normal childhood, suburban, grew up in the suburbs. It was like I didn't ever want for anything when I was growing up. And, I definitely took that for granted. And so anyways, school starts to happen, normal progression. And it's funny because I go to a lot of meetings. I hear a lot of things that are said in recovery, and I relate with a lot of them. And really one thing that really resonates with me is like, I grew up feeling like, I didn't get the handbook that everyone else got. It came naturally for them to like fit in and, feel accepted and do life and do well. And for me, I was always overthinking. I was always uncomfortable. I was always feeling like I was missing what everyone else was just naturally getting, and I think that later on in my life, as drugs and alcohol became a part of it, that's where my solution was found, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is how everyone else feels. So
Now
like,
I get it.
Right.
This is the hack.
Right.
And so, you start changing the way you feel, right? And you start with rubber cement. I know Ron loved him some carb cleaner.
Yeah.
You had that same sock for a lot of years, brother, with that carb cleaner,
know what I'm
potpourri,
saying?
all those plastic trash bags of potpourri, huffing that.
Locker room, remember locker room?
Oh man. So we start with huffing rubber cement, right? So
Yeah.
how does that come to be? You start with putting regular glue on your hand, peeling it off. Next thing you know, you're huffing paint.
I don't think there were. I have no idea how that actually started, but what I do remember, and this took a lot of brain cells, and it probably explains a lot as you watch the rest of this podcast. And if you know me personally, like it'll explain a lot. I would sit there and I would steal these rubber cement bottles constantly. I probably stole like 20 or 30 the first year, right? I'm in 3rd grade and I steal this rubber cement thing and I just sit there and I just dig my nose into it. And I'm like, for hours, dude, hours. And then until I could not breathe anymore and I would just pass out. And like that, in my opinion, and I have a 4th grader now and a kindergartner, and I can't even imagine, dude. That breaks my heart thinking about that.
Dude, I have a 13-year-old daughter and I have a 3-year-old daughter. And now I have context to 10, 11, 12, 13 years old.
Yeah.
And I have context of my own damn daughter. Yeah. And so when Johnny or Ron or anyone starts talking about 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, I'm thinking, holy shit.
Yeah.
Dude, that is so young, dude.
Yeah.
Like ridiculously young. Because we're talking, you started huffing paint like 10, 11 years old. So we're talking 3rd, 4th grade.
Yeah.
You're already associating your emotions with wanting to change the way you feel.
Right.
Right. And so from there, does the progression happen quick? I mean, Because we're talking third, fourth grade. So, I
Yeah.
mean, it's just whatever you can get your hands on. You know, how does it start to play out?
You know, it didn't go past that until I was in 7th grade. And, you know, my parents would always keep like a big bottle of vodka in the freezer.
You mean water?
Yeah, and it slowly over time it started to freeze, right? And which it's not supposed to do. That's because I was filling it up with water, and so you know, me and my buddies would go over and we'd drink, and that started in like 6th or 7th grade, and it was like immediately when I started drinking, consequences started happening in my life, and
Like
you know,
fast. Like minor
fast.
consumptions, DUIs.
Blackout. I would black out. I tipped over like we lived in I would say an upscale neighborhood, and like someone had like, remember those electric cars that everyone used to buy like back in like early 2000s, and one of our neighbors had an electric car, and I fucking tipped it over, like, you know, with me and a bunch of friends, and I don't even remember doing it, but they know
have you
for a
on
fact-
tape?
yeah, something. They knew. They're like, you did it.
Ring
and I was
camera.
like, I don't
Yeah.
even remember doing that, you know, and
Are you starting to get in trouble at home? You starting to get
Yeah.
suspended from school?
Yeah,
like all that kind of stuff?
Yep.
Arrested?
very quickly. You know, and another thing, and it's really controversial, but I do want to talk about it on here, is like pornography. Pornography became a really big part of my life early on. And it was like, so immediately I had this addiction to pornography and I had this addiction to substances, you know, and it was like anything that I could do to get me outside of the way that I currently felt being sober, that's what I wanted. And so I started doing that, you know, and
I don't think people talk about that enough, dude, because I'll tell you right now, dude, there was a period of time, you know, when I couldn't remember the last time I had sex sober, dude, and the fear of doing it sober and what that was going to be like, and am I going to perform, and like just the close relation with drugs and alcohol with sex, dude, the compulsive sexual behavior to be specific, it's so closely correlates, and it's not a topic that gets talked about a lot, you know, especially in treatment facilities. Luckily, we are gender specific. We have the ability to have more vulnerable and intimate groups in the settings like that. But for the most part, it's kind of, you know, leave it for the one-on-ones or leave it for that, because it's,
Right.
you know, you got to know how to navigate it and communicate it and talk about it and be vulnerable yourself as a facilitator. But I really appreciate you sharing that, because it goes so close together, and I think it's a fear for a lot of people, men for sure. You know, I you know, so but the consequences start to come, dude, and they start to come a little bit faster, right? And so you're in high school, and are you playing sports? What kind of crowds you hanging out with? What's high school look like for you?
So junior high, I also found weed in junior high too. But like right around that time, I was playing football. I was on a, what are they called? Not Pop Warner, but like Pop Warner. Arizona Competitive is what it's called. And I had a team that was just awesome. Like, I think, you know, 20% of them went on to go play college ball. Like, we got undefeated for like 4 years in a row. So I had a really great experience being on a team, getting that team, like that experience of
camaraderie,
being, exactly.
Leadership,
And cutting weight together. Like, I mean, it was a whole thing, and I got that experience. I'm very grateful for that. And what it meant to be part of a team that really cares about each other and takes care of each other, you know, and
How much of that do you think transitions into or translates into being a leader today from sports?
100%. Yeah. A lot of my core values are from those years of being in sports early on, and, you know, early on as a child.
Do you take some of those characteristics too, Ron, being in wrestling and, you know, in football as a kid and the
for
leadership that comes with that? I coach club soccer. My oldest daughter, I play still, I coach. And it's just such an integral part of growing up, and you know, we can play such a big part in their lives.
Yeah.
I know coaches played a lot, held a big part of my life.
Yeah.
You know, what about you, Ron?
Same. My wrestling coach, he was shout out Fred Seabury. He was the wrestling coach, and he had a pool business. And in the summertime, he would hire us, the guys that were on his wrestling team, to work for him in this pool business. And I'd learned so much from him, from sports itself, and then the work ethic, applying the same work ethic with sports to a job, and that translating into the world. And when I wasn't using drugs and alcohol, I was a good employee because I used all that stuff that I was taught by, many coaches and teachers for me, because I was the troubled kid in school, they were all trying to save me. And they were always trying to save me, right? They were always trying to help me out. And so I learned a lot of valuable lessons, right? And today, a lot of that translates into who I am and how I try to lead a team, because the true definition of a leader, right, is not all the accolades, and it's not all the titles, and it's not money. It's how many leaders that leader has produced, right? That's our job as leaders, is to make more leaders, because we can't do it ourselves, right? So for you, after sports, right, after all that happened for you, what did the progression of drugs and alcohol look like?
Yeah.
Harder drugs,
Oh yeah.
experiment with cocaine,
Yeah.
Bill
Yeah.
Mill.
I mean, cocaine, a guy named Jose introduced cocaine, right?
Yeah.
Checks out.
Yeah, checks out. And I remember when we found cocaine, it was like all of a sudden that's all we wanted to do every day.
No way.
Yeah, right.
Of course.
And
Did you hear the word crack right now, Ron?
I mean, well, I heard cocaine.
I started itching.
Same.
and so it becomes this thing, and that's how every substance has been for me. Like I was talking about rubber cement, right?
Yeah.
And I start huffing the rubber cement, and then it's like I just don't stop. I sit there for hours and hours and hours, and then I literally smell it until the thing is dried out, and then I go steal another bottle. And then the next day I'm in there smelling it, huffing it every day. It's never like a one time and then I just kind of leave it alone type of thing. It's like I do it and I'm like, oh, this is great. I'm gonna do this every day. And so that's the progression, is like,
Sure.
it goes from drinking or, rubber cement, drinking, weed, cocaine, and then pills, heroin, meth, all that other stuff.
It's crazy when we start to learn some big truths about the disease, the powerlessness, the unmanageability. Here's a great example of that, right? So when I first came home, right, and I go to New Freedom, shout out Sean Warren, right? I'm over there, I'm talking to him, sponsoring some guys, and he's like, hey, man, you want one of these on pouches, right? One of these on pouches. And I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll take one of these nicotine pouches, right? Immediately, I'm like, oh, shit, powerlessness, unmanageability, we're going to see, right? So I take one. I'm like, oh, head change. I like the way that makes me feel, right? Next time I see him a few days later, let me get another one, right? Next time I see him, let me get another one. Then I go, you know what? I'm going to buy one, right? Then I go, I'm just going to buy one more just package of them, That's it, just one more. Then I go back next time, I buy 10 of them, right? That obsession, that powerlessness, to the point where I have an ulcer now, and I'm literally just threw up in the middle of our podcast.
Yeah.
And I'm still putting these in. I fucking get acid reflux as soon as I put it in, dude. Literally put it in, throw up, jump right back on the show, dude. That's the obsession, dude. That's the powerlessness. That's the unmanageable. It does not matter what it is, bro. It could be fucking soda, right? I want more and more and more. And so I always and this could be a whole nother show, a whole nother podcast, whole nother time. But if we have that addictive switch that we all have, what we've all three have done is we've been able to channel it into success. We've been able to use that gas pedal, ego in a positive character way. Another show, another time, right? Where I'll show you, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to help people, and
I've got ego tatted right here. Yeah.
Right. So someone like ourselves, that the ego is never going away. We just know that. Some people might be a little bit easier, but for me, it's not going away. Yeah. So if it's not going away, well, I need to channel it and use it in a positive way versus a negative way, right? And it could be a tricky conversation. But when we talk about that, it was just a great example, dude, of the powerlessness, the unmanageability. It doesn't matter if it's heroin or an on pouch.
Right.
The same thing. So now we're at the point where if it's causing negative impact on your life, are you going to do something about it?
Right.
It's a good question I need to ask myself.
Yeah. Well, and that's
Hey, can I have them, please?
well, and that's like something that, that's a constant in my recovery, is like I find something that doesn't serve me anymore and I got to figure out where it fits in my life.
Yeah.
And I've never been good at that until I got into recovery. And even then, I've had some struggles, man. And I'm just really grateful for the men in recovery.
Yeah.
One of them you just had on this podcast. Rich Cooley's my sponsor. Shout out Rich Cooley.
Yeah, shout out Rich.
And
Awesome.
and there's just so many men that I've used in my life, or that God has spoken through them to me, that I've been able to reach out to them too, to be able to help me through those things and find out where things fit in my life.
Yeah, I mean, it is all about connection, and we're going to start to transition now into your journey and the miracle that takes place in your life. But I don't want to pass up the opportunity to talk about the transformation that's happened with your dad and your relationship with your father. And if you can just kind of just pick it up from the beginning, kind of just give the backstory on it, what happened, kind of like, and what your relationship is like today, because it's all about connection. We were talking about this earlier. I go to my parents' house, do yard work, and I'm just in tears. I'm so grateful that I get to contribute to their life for once. So why don't you share the transformation that obviously has taken place in your life and allowed this to happen, and then what it's like today with your father?
Yeah. Man, so my dad and we grew up as I started developing my addiction and tried to start being my own man. And, I went to college and didn't last very long. I struggled in college. And
Where'd you go?
I went to Broward College, and I was definitely a minority there out in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And it was a good experience, honestly, because what happened was I learned something about my addiction and about myself, is like, it doesn't matter where I live, where I go, is like, I'm still there, right? If I bring a problem from this room to the next room, that problem's in the next room now. It's not here anymore, And so like, I brought myself and my addiction to Florida when I went out there to college, and it continued, and it jumped off, my first friend, I was like, oh, this is, I'm going to have a great experience. I'm going to do college like a normal college guy and maybe drink a few beers. And then all of a sudden my first friend that I meet there is a guy named Ice, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like immediately it's like pills, dope, selling pills, selling dope. And like, I just can't figure out how to be normal, and how to live a normal experience.
It's like, everyone does meth. It's how we get through our finals.
Right.
It's going to be fine.
Right.
How you stay up?
Yeah.
And so what's the relationship like with your dad now at this point? Because we'll pick back up in college. I just don't want to pass up this, because I just think it's so special. And it's really just an example of recovery.
Yeah.
And so, you end up going to college, you find recovery and all the things. But your dad's been struggling this whole time, right?
So
and you didn't know that. Can you just share the history of it?
Yeah, I didn't get sober yet, right? So I went in, get out. I basically drop out of college. I come back to Arizona. Try to do like online college. It did not work.
No,
I'm not the
online.
type. Yeah.
Me neither.
And so I'm, trying to figure out, okay, what's the next step? I obviously know that I have a drug addiction. My dad knows that I have a drug addiction. My mom knows that I have a drug addiction. Like, I'm not fooling anyone at this point.
It's out there.
My dad was the type of dad to where he would always try to be the cool dad, and he would try to be my friend a lot of times. And, but at the same time, he was always a good example of like what who, like the type of man that I wanted to be. Even if he wasn't always that behind closed doors, if that makes sense, and so, I get sober, and I'm at this point, I was 5 or 6 years sober, and my dad, I didn't even realize that my dad had an alcohol addiction. I had no idea, because I would see him. I would always reference him as like being a normal drinker. Like, okay, glass of wine every night.
Comes home from work, has a couple beers.
Right.
No big deal.
Not even. It was a glass of wine, very classy. And what would happen is maybe two, right? And he would drink the other half of the glass of wine, and then he'd leave half the glass and he'd put it in the fridge. And every single time without fail, I'd go in the fridge, I'd drink the other half of the glass, and then there'd be like this much left in the bottle. I'd drink a little bit more, and then all of a sudden there's this much. I'm like, well, I don't want to
finish it.
Yeah,
I
might as well
finish
just finish it.
Yeah.
And so I was, because I was drinking so much, I was also oblivious to everything that was happening behind the scenes, to where I didn't even realize my dad had an alcohol issue. And so, I'm 5 or 6 years sober, and I get a call one night, and my dad's like, Mike, I need help. And I just got in an accident. I've got
and
alcohol in the car. Like, I don't know what the hell to do. Like, tell me what to do. And I was working in the, behavioral health at this time. I call my sponsor.
what a miracle that is, though, right? Like,
Man.
dude.
like it's already.
Oh, I was
a
brought
miracle.
to tears as soon as he called
just
me.
the call. Yeah, that's what I was about to
Yeah.
say. Just the call is.
Because he's always been, I'm like, Dad, what do I do?
If
And
only
for the
that
first
happened,
time-
if only that came out of it, it still would be phenomenal.
Yeah.
But that's
so-
just the tip of the iceberg.
And so I call my dad, or he calls me, and I'm like, I'm like, at this point, I'm like, okay, this has never happened to me before. What am I supposed to do? Call my sponsor, right?
Yeah.
So I call my sponsor. I'm like, what do I do? Guy named Terry Murphy's like, he goes, well, it's not for you to decide what he does. You can give him some options and let him decide. And so that's what I did. I was like, look, I can get you any treatment center that you want to go to. I will make sure it's taken care of. Or you can go, here's AA, here's some AA meetings by your house. I can get you plugged in with some sponsors. Here's a few phone numbers. What do you want to do?
Yeah, no pressure. These are the options.
Right. And he's like, I'm going to try AA. And that's all he did. He didn't go to treatment. And so like that's another thing that I take into consideration when I'm talking to someone on the phone and admissions. It's like, look, I try to tell them like, look, it's probably a better idea. People don't call a treatment center if they're not needing treatment.
Yeah.
99% of the time, But if this is, I would highly recommend you come into treatment. But I'm not God, dude. I don't know what's going to work for every person, and my dad is a perfect living experience or example of, I don't know it all. I don't. And my dad got sober and he's still sober for 6 or 7 years now.
That's awesome.
Yes, dude.
Yeah.
And not only that, but you guys get to chair meetings together. You got service commitments together.
We call each other. Oh, he's like, I remember for the first couple of years, he's like, how do I take a guy through a third step?
Yes,
I'm like, call your sponsor. I was
Yeah.
like, I know how to do it, but you should call your sponsor, but it's been the coolest. I get teared up even just thinking about it, man. Like I've done, he's called me. He's like, hey, I'm doing a H&I meeting, bringing a meeting into a treatment center. Do you want to come with me? And so we'll come and I'll start sharing my story. And I'm, at this point, I've been sharing my story for
so
years.
long, yeah.
And then he comes in and for the first time I hear her story and I'm like, oh, fuck, dude. And
I
I
didn't
just
know.
start bawling
Yeah.
in the middle of this
wow.
H&I. I'm getting teared up right now
Yeah.
thinking about it. And he's tearing up. All the clients are tearing up.
Yeah, dude.
And it was just the most powerful experience that I think I've ever felt, and
That's recovery.
Yeah.
Right there.
and so since then, him and I have done that multiple times. He calls me when he's like, I need a speaker. And we don't tell anyone unless they already know, right? But he'll be like, hey, I've known this guy for a long time. Here's
Then they connect
Yeah.
the dots and they're
Yeah.
like, this
Oh,
is
that's
cool.
great.
Yeah. Or he'll come up and give me like a kiss on the cheek and
Yeah.
people are like, whoa. I'm like, that's my dad.
I've known this guy for
Yeah.
a long time. Yeah.
So it is really beautiful, like how recovery and that domino effect of me getting sober has affected so many people in my life,
And it's really the third step prayer in action. It's like, here you go, God, build me up, relieve me of the selfishness, and let everybody bear witness to this miracle that's about to happen. And when I become visual proof and they bear witness to the transformation, the same way your dad, he knew it was you because he recognized your features. But from there, your example, living, breathing example of the program in action of God working through you, you were able to help him of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. Like, fuck, I need help. How'd you do it? Great question. I'm glad you asked.
Yeah.
Dude, and that's the juice of recovery. So now that we understand that, and we understand that in our profession we get some juice out of it, and then we have our service commitments and our sponsees, and we're present in the relationships in our life, and we're good fathers today, and we're good husbands, and so we couple all that together, and every single day the experience that we get is a positive one, to the point where for almost 12 plus years or whatever the case is, you haven't wanted to change the way you feel, dude.
Yeah.
Like, that is fucking phenomenal, dude.
It's not even an option.
Yeah.
Right. And like, that's, I think, if anyone's listening to this, that is, whether they're like in early recovery or on the brink of recovery or thinking about getting into recovery, it's like, man, it hasn't even been an option for me to go get loaded. And like, that's what's happened. The book talks about it, placing us in this position of neutrality. And it's not a problem, nor is it, it's just not a problem anymore. My problem today is how many hours, what's my screen time look like, and how many hours have I spent fucking off and not working or not doing what I said I was going to do, Like there's a big change and like a lot of luxury problems that are in my life today.
And that shift really starts to happen, you know, because once you start going to college and you're out there in Florida and you're going to Broward and you meet ICE and now you're doing the drugs, and the progression is starting to happen more. But we're also talking about a time period when OC 80s were falling out of the sky everywhere. You can get a script anywhere you're living in Florida. People are literally moving to Florida just for the pills, just for the OCs, right? And so finally, you know, your mom, you know, just like my parents always thought it was my friends. It was Peoria Police's fault. I had a shitty PO. It was never my fault. It was everyone else's fault. Finally, they realized that I was the problem. It didn't matter where I was going. I was going to be a problem, right? And that's similar as what happened. The parents like, okay, problem. We need to bring him back. Let's get him back out here. So you come back out here and you start to go to college, and it all starts to culminate to the point where your couch surfing, you know, your everything you have is one pillow.
Yeah.
It's like all the way down to a pillow. And that's what we truly call the gift of pain and desperation. So why don't you just kind of pick it up there with a snapshot of that gift and pain and desperation, what it was like before you went to Community Bridges and was given the blessing of recovery, and just kind of pick up how you were feeling then.
Yeah. My dad still has this saved in his phone as a voicemail that I left him because he got to the point where he cut me off. He's like, I cannot have you in my home anymore. They started going to FA, which is Families Anonymous, which is basically Al-Anon.
Yeah.
And like a
Tough love.
Yeah. And so they all of a sudden started saying things like, I can't help you kill yourself. And I'm like, fuck you, where do you hear that?
Yeah.
And so my dad's like, I can't deal with this anymore. The only time I am open to you calling me is if it's a ride to treatment, you know? So I end up calling my mom, or my mom called me. Well, really, I want to back up for a second. I had a conversation with my sister. I have an older sister. She's 3 years older. We had never really been that close. But, you know, we had this conversation. She called me. I was living on my drug dealer's couch, who's the older brother of a good friend of mine that's in recovery today. And I'm living on his couch. I had like one pair of basketball shorts that had so many burn holes from me nodding out. You could literally see through them.
Did you borrow a pair of my shorts?
Yeah. Oh man, it looked like Swiss cheese. Yeah. And so I'm sitting there. I have drool stains all over the shoulders and all over my shirt because I don't know how to do laundry, nor do I care to. You know, nothing mattered to me other than getting loaded. I had a stolen GPS Garmin, like a Garmin GPS thing that I was like trying to hawk at a pawn shop.
For more than $10?
Yeah. And no one wants to buy it. They're like, that's a piece of shit. Yeah. And, you know, I walked into a pawn shop, I remember, and I looked around and I'm like, half the shit in here is mine.
Yeah.
And that was like this pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. One piece of that, you know, was walking in the pawn shop. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah,
dude,
I tell people I've never lost anything. I know where all my shit's at. The pawn shop or the dope man's house. I've never fucking vacuumed underneath my couch and found money or wallets or watches or fucking laptops. Yeah. I know where all my shit. I give everything away. And it talks about that in the doctor's opinion, making the supreme sacrifice rather than continue to fight. I'll sacrifice my freedom, my relationships with everybody in my life, my own health, anything financially, of material possessions. I'll throw it all away. Yeah. And sometimes it's just fucking, I'm suicidal, dude, every day of my life, until we're given that gift of pain and desperation. And so finally, you know, picking up with that call with your sister, does she
so that's what drove me to go to detox the first time. This was not actually when I got sober, but this is when I started
leading up to it,
seriously thinking about getting sober. Is I was living on my drug dealer's couch, had a pillow, a stolen Garmin, you know.
We had a few of those around.
Yeah, we did. I was down. And I had this conversation with my sister, and she's like, I want you to get help. I'm like, I'm fine. She's like, you're not fine. You're a fucking loser. And that was the first time that she had ever been real with me about this, you know? And I was like, I'm not a loser. She's like, you're a fucking loser. Yeah. She goes, you used to always have tons of friends. You'd have nice clothes. You'd have a good looking girlfriend. Yeah. She goes, you're a fucking loser now. No one wants to spend time with you. I'm getting choked up talking about it.
No, yeah.
And because it was so influential. And I was like, you're right.
Yeah.
And that was the moment of clarity that I had. And so I was like, you're right. You know, and I was like, let's go. And so I went to detox. Yeah. And I didn't end up staying sober that specific time, but that's when I really started being serious about recovery.
Yeah.
So.
And so, and that was one of the biggest moments for me that led me to recovery, was realizing that love is an action word. I used to call my wife and be like, "Hey, babe, I need you to do a Western Union, send me $50 to Mexico. Did the homie's girl hit you back? Grab a pen and a piece of paper. I only got one phone call. You're going to be here this weekend. Make sure you bring quarters. Make sure you're first in line. Make sure you get the rip and dips out of the vending machine right away. Did the homie's girl hit you back yet? Send out another message real quick. Okay, can you give me the 10-digit number? Okay, love you." And she'd be like, "Shut up." And I couldn't wrap my mind around how she would possibly have the audacity. And if I asked anybody in recovery, any of our clients at any of our treatment facilities, if we ask them if you love your kids, your wife, your dog, your siblings, your parents, the answer is yes. And I am not debating that with you. You're probably just like me, where you mean that with everything that you are. But your actions might show something totally different. Right. And my actions were showing that I hated my daughter, that I hated my wife, that I hated my mother, I hated my aunt. I didn't have a friend in the world. That's what it showed. And in that moment, I realized that, and it became unacceptable. And that's kind of very similar, where she hits you with that piece of reality where you're thinking, holy shit, the people I love the most don't want anything to do with me.
Yeah. And I didn't know anything else either.
Yeah.
Right. And that's like how that continues, is like, I didn't know how not to do that. I didn't know how to love people.
Sure.
I didn't know how to love myself. That's for sure. And that was clear.
Yeah.
But I didn't know how to love anyone, including myself, and the men in recovery taught me how to do that.
Yeah, and what's it been like too with you, Ron, as well? Because you're rebuilding with your mother and rebuilding trust and all those things.
With everybody,
with everyone, and everything that you've been through with your father, and and everything that you're going through with him currently right now, and your mom wanting to see, just like it talks about in the 9th step. We got to take the lead. A remorseful mumbling won't fit the bill at all. Like, we really have to show and be consistent. I've been home now for 4 years. I've been sober now for over 7 years. I've sent amends letters. I've even had amends conversations. And now I have a family member of hers that is finally ready now to hear it again, I guess. Right. And so now I got to be open-minded, and I got to understand that it's on their time, right? And continue to do my part and all those things. But it's not easy, dude. And so what's that been like for you?
I mean, huge. And when I just went back to New York to be there for my dad and that whole situation, a lot of things happened. I was able to, so even at almost 11 years sober, my mother still didn't believe it. She can see all the podcasts. She can see what I've chosen for my career path. She hears it in my voice, but she needed to see for herself. And I was back at Christmas time, and I did get to see her, so she caught a little snapshot. But then she was able to really see me be vulnerable and be honest. And it hit her when my dad was in the hospital, and I was there 8 hours a day, and then I would drive out to my mom's house and spend some time with her and building a relationship again with my brother and my stepdad. But it hit my mother when I walked in her kitchen the second time. And I walked through you go through the garage into the kitchen, and she was standing there waiting for me with tears in her eyes. And I wrapped my arm around her, and I kissed her. She's short, kissed her on her head, and with the other hand, opened the fridge, grabbed the juice jug like it's my house, and started chugging the juice just like I did when I was 16 years old. And she said, "Oh my God, this is real. I have my son." And for her, that was her moment. And I was just so grateful that she got to have that moment. And because of that, my brother trusts me. My brother invites me to his house. He wants me to be part of his children's life. So it's just like
your daughter.
To me, yeah, running into finding my daughter. So I'm driving down I'm in back Rochester, New York, and I would leave the hospital and drive to my dad's house and stay there at night. And I would stop and pick up food and then go home. And I know my daughter's out there in active addiction, my youngest daughter. Now, Rochester's a pretty big city. So I kind of had an idea maybe where she could be, but I didn't know. I'm driving down the road, dude.
No phone, hasn't talked to her.
Yeah, I haven't talked to her in about
hasn't
2
seen
years.
her in how long?
Haven't seen her. Haven't laid eyes on her in 13 years, 14 years.
Wow.
I'm driving down the road, and coming out of the railroad tracks onto the strip is my daughter. And I'm talking to Emmett, one of my friends on the phone, and I'm like, "Oh my God, that's my daughter." And I turned the car around. I yelled her name, and she looked at me, and I was able to see her and get her some food, and being able just to let her know that there is a solution, and just it's amazing how all that. Yeah, I got her a phone, all the things. You know, it's just amazing how all that happened out of this tragedy with my dad, and being an example, and being there, and being present for that, and not knowing how to. I don't know how to be there for my father having open heart surgery and having a stroke and being in his weakest moment. I don't know how to do that. All I know how to do is be present in that moment. And I do want to say this before we go on to the next subject is, you know, Jason did something for me 2 weeks ago. And I don't know if he knows the magnitude of it, but I was getting overwhelmed with all this emotion, you know, and you being emotional is kind of bringing it out of me, you know, and I had all this stuff going on. He just called me. He never calls me unless he asks me if Kipu's open. Yeah. That's the only time
I call him at 3 a.m. Hey, is Kipu open, brother? Okay, good.
He calls me and he just starts giving me this pep talk. And he starts highlighting all these things that I've been part of in the last couple weeks with my family and connecting to the recovery. And I just so needed to hear that at that moment. I just needed to be reminded. And that's why we're involved in the fellowship. That's why this connection thing works. That's why it's our responsibility at all times to be the light, even when we don't feel like being the light. Because you may say that one thing that could change someone's entire life. Because that's what happened to me, and that's what happened to Johnny, and that's what happened to him, and that's what happened to you. God does wear people clothes, and that is love. I have no other explanation for it. That's what love feels like.
That's beautiful, man. It really is.
I mean, dude, driving through the hood looking for his daughter he hasn't seen in 12 years and happens to see her, dude. Gets her a phone. She called him the other day. I mean, we were ready to put her ass on the plane, but you know as well as I do that they got to want it.
Right.
But she knows that we're here and we got an avenue and a path and a way to get in touch with her now, and we'll keep doing our part, man.
I mean, every part of me wants to get Johnny and Mohammed and drive out there and throw a bag over her head and zip tie her and throw her in the back of a rental van and drive her across the country. But we all know what that result's going to be. It'll be bad.
Yeah, just like 2011, brother.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we're at in the same time period when you get sober. I think it's pretty cool because in this time period in 2012, when you're at Crossroads Arcadia, because you have the conversation with your sister, you finally have the willingness to get some treatment and get some help and to make some changes. And we got to pick ourselves up and dust ourselves off, you know, and relapse is part of recovery till it's not. And it's only part of your story if you're learning from it. Otherwise, you're just getting loaded, you know? Yeah. And it became a part of your story you were learning from, you know? And finally, you land in Arcadia, damn near the same time that I was there, Johnny was there. We were all pretty much there around the same time. Joe Peterson, Ghost Pepper, what's his name? The Ghost. Eric. Shout out Eric. The guy who taught the Right Track program with Ghost Pepper.
Oh, yeah. I put the ghost pepper in his seed.
So the ghost pepper he would give us every single morning, because the whole thing around the ghost pepper, because drugs hijack the brain, right? It tricks your brain into thinking it's producing the pleasure center, euphoria, all the things. The neural pathways close up, so when you stop using drugs, that's why you feel like shit, because your brain thinks it's been producing the natural fucking chemicals, but it's not. So you feel like dog shit. So his whole thing was just like food and sex and all these things that engages the same pleasure center, just like spicy foods. So the whole thing was introduce ghost pepper into your diet. It engages the brain, hot as hell, producing natural chemicals in your brain, just because the brain's marvelous and it'll rebuild. So that was the whole concept behind it. It's going to give you that little jump start.
It's funny that you bring that up, because I remember the ghost pepper. I don't remember the story behind. I was a shithead when I was in treatment. I was the worst client that you will ever meet. I was in trouble constantly. So funny story about that. When Randy was doing that, I remember he walked out. He's like, I gotta go to the bathroom real quick. Goes out. He has the ghost peppers and then sunflower seeds. It was me and like 3 other guys. We cracked open a few of his sunflower seeds and put a bunch of ghost peppers mixed into the sunflower seeds. And he was just, I think he might be used to it. I don't know, but he just was like, it never freaked him out or anything.
Nothing.
Like, it was no.
Put a few drops of Visine in there. They don't shit their pants. You're like, what the?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but it's that same time period, dude, and that's why we've had service commitments, all of us. I've had the same service commitment at Crossroads for 4 years. I do big book studies on Saturday nights at Midtown because they gave me a scholarship to do the Right Track program when I had no other place to go. They took me in, and I'll be forever grateful for that. And so let's pick it up there, right? So you get to Arcadia and you start to find recovery, right?
Yeah. And I want to share about that too.
Yeah.
Is like, there's these programs that have been around for a long time, like Crossroads and CBI. And I mean, there's a lot of them. There's a few of them.
Yeah.
Not actually a lot of them. There's a few of them that, and then you start to talk to a lot of these guys that you've had probably a lot of them on this podcast, where the guys that went to these programs, like there's real recovery that happens there. And there is something very special about that. There's not a mansion. There's not a, massage therapist. And don't get me wrong, if I was if I had the option to go to a place that had a massage therapist and a pool and all this stuff, I'd be like, yeah, sign me up. Yeah. But at the same time, it's like, I'm grateful that I went through that experience. And like, it doesn't matter where you go, it matters that you go.
Yes.
And I'm so grateful that for the experience that I had when I was at Crossroads, I was in a room with, God, a ton of other men. I mean, there's some, everyone has their crazy stories of being in treatment, but like usually like weird, like, because you're like starting to feel for the first time in a long time. And you're like starting to have a sense of humor again. At least it was for me.
Me too.
And anyway, so I go back. When I entered Crossroads Arcadia, I was living at my dad's house. He was nice enough to let me back into the house after a couple of relapses. I was like, I'm going to treatment tomorrow. Yeah. Tomorrow turned into tomorrow. Yeah. And then tomorrow turned into tomorrow. Right. And so after a few days of that, finally he's like, we're going tomorrow or you're fucking out of here. And
as a matter of fact, I'm taking you.
Right. I will take you as soon as I get done with my meeting. Right. And so the night before, I pick up dope for the last time, some heroin. And I do like a 0.5 gram shot and I OD. And my buddy, the kids that I was with, because we were kids at the time. I was 20 years old. Yeah. Kids.
Yeah.
The kids.
That's another thing. Hold on, dude. He got sober at 20 years old. God,
isn't that wild?
That is phenomenal, dude. I think we talk about it all the time when we see the younger kids come in, 19, 20, 21, and we pull them aside. We're like, dude, if you can get this shit right now, dude, you will save yourself death and at least 20 years of misery, dude.
Oh, yeah.
You have the greatest gift in front of you right now. If you could just wrap your mind around the fact that this is a problem in your life. Yeah. But you got sober at 20 years old, dude. That's phenomenal, dude.
And it's like I got sober for lack of better options. And that's the truth, right? At the time when I got sober, it was for lack of better options because I tried to figure out every other avenue that I could do other than getting sober. I was like, the last place that I ever want to do is go to treatment. That's the last thing I want to do. And so I pick up the night before, I OD, the kids that I'm with, they bring me back. They're doing CPR. They're splashing water on my face.
Yeah,
and
ice cubes on your nuts, all kinds of shit.
And somehow my head, I was in a car, my dad's car, right? Not even my car. I would always take my dad's car.
Of course.
My head somehow got stuck underneath the steering wheel, right? So I'm sitting there basically pinned under the steering wheel in the driver's seat, ODing and like convulsing. And that was actually pretty common for me. Like it got to the point to where it was like 70% of the time that I would shoot up, I would sit there and I would basically have seizures. I would have start convulsing and I'd fall on the ground and all the people that I would get loaded with are like, we can't get loaded with you anymore,
bro,
dude.
Killing the vibe, brother.
Right. and I'm like, man, I was the guy that like, well, at least I'm not as bad as that guy.
Yeah.
And, but I never saw that. Right. I'm like, well, you guys are,
pussies.
Right. I didn't know if I could say that. Like, you guys are fucking pussies. And I'm in the hood hanging out with a bunch of like dudes that like that's not,
that's not their get down.
Right. Yeah. And so anyways, I'm ODing. They somehow wake me up. I throw up all over the place, all in my dad's car. Oh, my dad was pissed.
It happens.
I go home, I still have a 0.5 gram in my pocket, right? And I'm like, okay, tomorrow I'm going to treatment. All my buddies are like, good luck, man. You fucking need it.
You deserve it.
Yeah.
You got this.
Yeah.
And love and respect.
Yeah, yeah. And so I go to treatment, or no, I go home. My dad's like, I'm going to this meeting. I'll be back in 4 hours or whatever it was. You know, be ready to go.
Yeah, don't fuck this up.
Right.
We're leaving in 4 hours.
So as soon as he walks out the door, I slam up, OD again. And I'm out, I wake up and I was like, again, like seizure, but this time it was like, I don't know what it was, but I was out. All my extremities, my arms and my legs were like completely numb because of how I fell on the ground and passed out. And I could not feel anything. And I wake up immediately, I'm throwing up. And my head was pounding so bad because it was 2 overdoses in a 12-hour period. My head was pounding so bad I could not turn my head from side to side. It hurt so bad. My eyes were burning. I couldn't look in the mirror. I remember I go upstairs because I'm like, oh my God, my dad's about to be home. Like, and I look at myself in the mirror and I'm like, there is no better time to go to treatment than right
now. Like you saw it with your own 2 eyes.
I was like, I fucking need this.
You weren't living in a delusional fantasy land anymore that you just should have turned left instead of right. Now you're going to turn right next time and it's going to be fine.
Yep.
And you had that gift, right? And so you go to Arcadia, right? Yep. And then pick up that progression, because just like the disease of addiction is progressive, recovery is also progressive. If you do the work, it gets progressively fucking better.
And it happened really quick for me. You know, I had a sponsor that, thank God, he was a knight, right? So I've been part of the Knights since back in 2012, and they have this saying like once a night, always a night. At least that's what I was told. So, and
shout out to all the Knights too.
Seriously.
Yeah. Do amazing
saved my
things.
life.
Yeah.
And what happened was that, you know, the way that he took me through the steps was quick. He's like, if you don't go through the steps and you don't get through this process, you're going to end up relapsing and probably fucking die the way that you use, you know? So I'm going to help you get through this and I will match your willingness. And so I'm like, okay. And for whatever reason, I've always been one of those guys that procrastinates. Everything that I've ever done in my entire life up to this point, procrastinate. I wait till the very last minute and then a couple more.
Sponsor's going to be there in 35 minutes. You're trying to bang out the resentments.
Right, right. And no, and so for the first time in my life.
It's different this time, but typically all my sponsees do that. That was my own experience too. I did that shit too.
And for the first time in my life, my sponsor, like I asked this guy to sponsor me and he's like, call me every day. Every single day I fucking called him. It was crazy. I was like, how is this happening? And that's that gift of desperation that you were talking about, you know, and grace, honestly. And so I'm calling my sponsor every day. He's like, hit your knees and pray when you wake up. Jeff Guthrie is bringing a meeting, back to basics.
Dude. We had him on the show. Yeah.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah. And I still have recordings of him in 2012 or 2013 on my, it's somehow in a cloud that somehow has gone through and I still have the ability to access it from like an iPhone generation 1, right? That I have a recording of Jeff talking at a meeting called Spirit to Spirit that they used to do at Solution. And man, like Jeff Guthrie is definitely one of those guys that God wearing human clothes, right?
Dude. When we had him on the show, I was like, you don't remember? I guarantee you don't remember it, but I've never forgot it. And I do a big book study every Saturday night. I've done it for 4 years. And I just hope that it's just a quarter of the fire that you brought, because I've never forgot your fucking big book study, dude. He knew the book, his enthusiasm,
broke it down.
Dude, it got my attention
in a way that I could understand it. And that's what I needed I needed people to spend the time with me, to sit down, take time out of their day to sit down with me and explain it to me to where I could hear it. And God used Jeff Guthrie to speak through him to me. So then I was able to get this, you know, and understand and relate and say, wow, that's fucking me. Like because
you got to diagnose you.
Right.
You know?
And so I bought fully in. I was completely sold on AA. I was like, holy shit. And what happened, the way that I got bought in was one of the suggestions was in the morning, wake up, spend a few minutes meditating, pray and ask God to put someone in your life that you can help other than yourself. And so I started doing that. And then as soon as I started doing that, my life got so good so quick. Yeah. It was like everything. It was like I flipped a switch on. Yeah. And all of a sudden, you know, I've got relationships in my life. I'm starting to go to school. I start doing well in school. I start, you know, being able to keep a job. I start making money at the job, like more money than I've ever made. I'm like
saving money, building credit scores.
I put the system in my truck that I always wanted to get. You know, I remember a crazy experience for me was I bought a marble table, right, at an estate sale,
Yeah.
and I spent like $400 on these like set of marble tables and coffee table and stuff, and I was like, how did I just spend $400 on a table? Like I would never have done that
Dude,
before.
the recovery, when you recover yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, all that other stuff comes with it, dude.
Yeah.
And it makes me happy. I like nice shit. It makes me happy too. But I was the happiest I'd ever been finding recovery in prison away from my wife and my daughter. True, it fixed an internal problem with an internal solution. But I still like nice things, dude. Like I like the ability to be able to go out and to have nice things and do all that. Because, dude, I've worked for it myself, dude. I've been able to really put the work in. There's value behind it. It's hard work. And, it's just a complete, total package of everything that we get to do in recovery, dude. It's amazing to be a part of. And your life is a reflection of it today. And so when we start to really look at, the shift, and is it the service work? If there was like the biggest contributor to your recovery, was it sponsorship? Is it hitting a ton of meetings? Is it working in recovery? Is it God? What is it?
Prayer and service work. Those things combined, man, unshakable foundation. And that's why I love the night so much, is it's all about service, right? And like being of service, sponsoring guys. Like that was a saying that I heard a lot in early recovery. Like, hey, are you wanting to be of service? Okay. Do you not want to get loaded? All right, cool. Come do this. And like, so a lot of what my experience in treatment was when I was having, one of the suggestions that was given to me was, if you start thinking or having a mental obsession, immediately hit your knees, pray, and beg God to remove that obsession. After, call someone, typically your sponsor. If you can't get a hold of your sponsor, call someone else in recovery, let them know what's going on. Third, turn your thoughts and your attention to someone you can help. And like and I think I heard that from Jeff, probably is my guess.
Yeah.
I have no idea. Someone in my early recovery at Crossroads told me do these things. And the more that I did that, anytime that I would have an obsession or thought about getting loaded or thought about how much money I could, had to be able to get loaded or whatever it was, all of a sudden those obsessions start coming. You stop coming, and I stopped thinking about me. And I'm sitting there doing the dishes when it's not my turn to do dishes. I'm sitting there picking up cigarette butts when they're not my cigarette butts. I'm sitting there pulling weeds. Some of the times I was in trouble. They called it getting an hour, right? Hey, that's an hour. And I'd have to pull weeds or clean the doors. I cleaned every single door in that place.
Multiple times.
Yeah, but what happened was it got it outside of myself. If you think about it, it's like it's counterintuitive. So like if, the way that, so the book talks about it and it says selfishness and self-centeredness, that's the root of my troubles. So it's like, how do I stop being selfish and self-centered? I think about others.
It's not that complicated, dude.
Right.
No.
Like we don't have to overcomplicate it. And I got that from Jeff too. And I share it to this day. The three most basic tools that the program gives us, bare bones basic, is three things. Talk about the way you feel. Speak on it, dude. Share it. Good and bad. Call your recovery community sponsor, people in your support system. Speak on your emotions. Second thing is prayer, meditation. Talk to God. Listen to God, right? Get connected to God. And then the third thing is get into his will. And his will is to get out of your own goddamn way and just go help someone. My will is selfishness. God's will is to be selfless. Go fucking help someone. As long as we're willing, and all of us know the secret sauce, as long as we're willing to help anyone day or time when we can, as long as that willingness is still there, all the outcomes will still continue to work out in our lives, dude. And it's been a reflection of it. And your life since 2012 has progressively gotten better, right? And it hasn't always been easy, and there's been moments and it's been challenging, but you've stayed the course, continue to do your part, and the outcomes have continued to happen. You've continued to experience life. And so now I kind of want to talk about the professional progression. Because a lot of us started out as BHTs and PRM BHTs and overnight BHTs. Shit, you went right into admissions, brother.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the progression of, in 2016, starting in this field to now, running a program, being the director, and what that's been like for you.
Yeah. I mean, I want to be as transparent as I possibly can because, one of the things I'm like, working in a treatment center, I was like working in admissions. I saw, especially like a private treatment program. It's like, someone spends $30,000 on coming to treatment, and you're like, man, this place is making money. And like, you think it's all money, right? But like the reality is like now as a owner, it's like, but you don't understand 90% of that goes to our staff.
Yeah, dude.
90%, if you got a nice facility, that costs money. If you got a massage therapist and you got a horse therapist, and you got like all this stuff that we do at Hope and Healing Addiction Treatment Centers.
Equine therapy.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
I mean, we're doing all this stuff, and it's like, and you don't realize it when you're on the other side of it. A lot of times, I mean, maybe you do. I don't know. I didn't. And then, you know, running the business is there's a business aspect to it, you know? But what's really cool, and I'm very grateful for, is like, it's something that I can feel good about.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, like, I feel fucking amazing about what I do, and I don't have to hide, you know, I don't have to make something up about what I'm doing. I don't have to bend corners. I don't have to break any rules. Like, I don't have to do any of that.
I mean, you're talking to a couple sales guys here. We're all sales guys, right? And, you know, and you had said that your sponsor had told you, you know, why don't you get into working in recovery and sell something you believe in? And that's what makes us so effective. We're sales guys our whole life, dude, but we're finally selling something that has the extreme amount of value. It works wholeheartedly, and it's something that'll pay dividends for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Right. So you can hear that in our voice when we're speaking about it. We're not trying to close them for the credit card number for some bullshit they're never going to get. Right. We're talking about a life changing that will have a ripple effect across every aspect of your family if you worked a program like it should be. So in 2016, you start working for Pinnacle Peak, right? You started out in admissions. So talk what that was like, getting into admissions, the progression over there at Pinnacle Peak, and then ultimately making a jump into soul surgery.
Yeah. You know, it was a lot. I learned a lot. You know, I was around a lot of good people that understood, and also too, were in recovery. So, and some of them were honestly trying to figure it out too at the same time. It was a newer treatment program at the time. So we were all just trying to figure stuff out. And, but I'm really grateful for that experience, and I got to meet a lot of people. And one thing that I learned too is, like, you never want to burn bridges in this industry, because the guy that's a BHT today might own a treatment center tomorrow.
Yep.
You know, and that was one of the issues that I had when I went to after Pinnacle Peak was like, I went to soul surgery, and like, I don't want to ever talk bad about anyone. I don't like doing that. One thing that I will say is that I'm strongly against burning bridges, and that unfortunately was like a common thing that happened a lot when I was working there. And I'd always like try to be like, you know, try to fix it. I'm like a fix it type of guy. And I'm also a people pleaser, you know? And so it's like, you know, I don't want to see, but there's a lot of unnecessary stuff that happened that shouldn't have happened. Right. And, like yelling at someone over, it's like, yo, this is a treatment center, you know? And anyways, you know, I had what I learned a lot about the insides of how a treatment center runs. And I learned how to grow a treatment center. And I learned, a lot about insurance. I learned a lot about different modalities. I did a bunch of
things. Yeah.
Oh, I did tons of CEUs and courses, and met with lots of therapists, and like just really gained a lot of knowledge. You know, one of the things I really like this too, and I've made this mistake for anyone who's listening to this that's like works in the field, is like there's this therapist, her name's Brenna Gonzalez, and she had this sign in her room, because I'd go in there and I'd be like, hey, yeah, me and my wife, or hey, yeah. And she's like, she'd point at the sign and says, I'm not your therapist. And like, you know, and it's like, you should get a therapist. So I have a therapist now, right? And I have a personal therapist, and like, and that's also something I wanted to talk about too, is like, you know, I learned this early on was, you know, just because I work in recovery doesn't mean I'm doing recovery.
Right.
Or just because I work in treatment doesn't mean I'm doing recovery. You know, I try to keep those things separate, and as much as I can.
Yeah.
And sometimes they blend in a little bit, but I don't count me going to work as me going to a meeting or doing step work with a guy, because those are two separate things. And
but what you've started to gain is a whole bunch of experience and a whole bunch of knowledge, because that's the thing, is a lot don't realize the back end of it. And, you know, obviously we want to help everyone. And as a business owner in this space and running a treatment center, dude, I've scholarship way too many people, dude. Like, but is it too many? I don't think it's too many. My partner might think it's too many, but I also know God's will, dude. And I know if I take care of my part with the action steps and lead with my heart, that the outcomes are gonna, but it still comes down to dollars and cents.
Yeah.
Right. So there's still that component of it as well. But we continue to learn and we continue to stay grounded, continue to associate with people who've done it before and people who are going to lead with their heart as well, but also make sure that we're not leading with all heart. Because I'm also a people pleaser. I believe I can read everyone's mind. I don't like confrontation. I have a hard time saying no and all the things.
Yeah.
Even 7+ years later, still suffering from them. I still have to be aware of and work on them.
Yep.
So I take all that into consideration and just try to do my very best and ultimately lead with service and a servant heart. And so through this time period from 2016 now all to 2020, you've been running admissions teams, business development, intake process, increasing revenue,
We
increasing
did a couple mergers. We did, I mean,
a whole bunch
Yeah.
of things, a bunch of stuff that you were involved in, ultimately leading in 2020 to have the ability, which I love to hear the story, have the ability of how hope and healing addiction treatment came into play and
Yeah.
what you've been doing now for the last 5 years over there and amazing work that you guys have done. So I kind of like to close it up, how the company was born, what that transition's been like for you. And again, how we can get in touch with you and how we can find you guys.
Yeah. So, so I had left my job at Soul Surgery because I wanted to do like a native specific treatment program, right? Because I had these relationships with these tribes and they trusted me to make sure that their members were getting help.
Yeah.
And so they would call me a lot. And, you know, I'm sitting here, I'm like, okay, there needs to be something that has like this cultural specific aspect to it. You know, talking circles and sweat lodge and and ability to do ceremonies and Wellbriety and like all this stuff that's really pivotal for natives looking for recovery that might not mesh with like the Western clinical approach. And so I'm like, okay, let's do this. Long story short, the guy that I was going to do it with, COVID hits. He's sick. All of his employees are sick. He's like, now's not a good time. I'm like, I just quit my fucking job, dude. What am I supposed to do? Anyways, I'm on LinkedIn. I see someone says, oh, we started this treatment program and we want to help Native Americans. I'm like, what the hell? Like who, you know?
Perfect.
Well, I was like, they beat me to it. Like, oh man. And this has been what I've been talking about for like a year and a half, 2 years. And so I wanted to do this. And so I go tour and they had one client and they had really no idea, you know, what they were doing. And they were just like, oh, you know, this is something that we could do. And they had a beautiful facility, license, everything was ready to go.
We can work with this. We can work.
Well,
with
I'm like,
this.
how do you guys open? It's one client. Well, you know, we're probably, I don't know, we underestimated marketing and we're just not probably gonna have to shut it down. And I'm like, well, let me take a stab at it. You know, you don't have anything to lose. Might as well give me a shot. And so we basically made an agreement. And after 90 days of proving that I was able to not only just keep it full, but make sure that there was, you know, private tribes that were sending their members into the treatment program and that we were like really putting the right professionals in the right places and having a cultural provider and you know, like all these different aspects that are so important to a strong treatment center. And so we put those things into place and it was like,
bam.
It just, and I knew from the very beginning too, it was like, there's this quote, it's vision is the art of seeing what's invisible to others. Right. And I think I said that right. And I had the vision for that.
Because there's so many other programs that were all in the native space, but they weren't coupling with specific cultural, you know, modalities, if you will.
And at the
that's
time, there was
thing.
nothing.
Yeah.
There was one treatment center that did Native American stuff, maybe two, right? In Arizona.
Like really did it. Yeah.
Right. And so I'm like, okay, so this is perfect. And this is and I've had this vision for a while. And yeah, so exactly. So there was no one really doing it. And I'm like, this is what needs to happen. And it was based on, you know,
your experience and what you've seen. And
well, my experience, what worked for me in treatment, right? But a lot of like tribal input from the tribes that I had contracts with that were sending people to treatment with me is like, it's like, well, what do you guys want to see?
That's the smartest thing you can do. Work with your community partners, right? It's the
Absolutely.
same thing with the insurance companies. You know, as a consultant, you know, we're consultants, right? And, you know, it's like, dude, your insurance contract literally tells you what you can bill, and the codes are literally right on there. Why don't we work with Aetna and build a program that they actually allow and get them on the same page? Like, it's literally in black and white. You know, you just have to read. You got to do things the right way, and you can't trip over a couple pennies, dude. You know, trying to make a couple pennies. You know, whatever. I said that all wrong, but you know the statement I was trying to talk about, right? And so now, over the last 5 years being over there, just the amazing things that you guys are doing over there. Can you just talk about the levels of care one more time? Just preface with the PHP, the IOP, the total amount of beds, and again, how they can find you and the type of programming that you have. Because I know that there's many men and women desperately in need that are listening to this podcast or watching this podcast, that they have some hope that they can do things differently and they have a little bit of willingness. And I want them to be able to connect, because just like Hope and Healing, just like Desert or any of the other amazing founders and CEOs and directors we've had on the show, we're much stronger together. And it doesn't matter if they call you or they call us, we will not stop until we found them a place.
Yeah.
And so why don't you just kind of talk again about, you know, Hope and Healing, levels of care, and how we can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So website, phone number. Hopefully we can do that in the editing side. So azhopeandhealing.com, and we'll put the phone number right here.
Put the phone number.
So we have residential PHP, IOP. We also have a men's specific residential program for natives. So we have a sweat lodge there. So that sweat lodge is open to anyone in any of our programs. They don't have to be native. They don't have to, I mean, it's open for all, you know, and what's really cool about that is, you know, it's a spiritual experience being in there. That is a ceremony. That's a sacred experience being there, you know, and you really feel that like when you're in there. And so, you know, if a huge part of recovery is connecting spiritually, well, what's one way that I can do that? Using Sweat Lodge. That's a tool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. That's a tool to get closer spiritually. And so we use tools like that at Hope and Healing, and that's for everyone. We have a veterans program. We work with military families. We're in network with TRICARE, TriWest, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Anthem. We're about to have Cigna and Aetna within the next 30 days.
Yes.
In network, we work with, I mean, our goal is to have a program that's able to work with anyone that calls.
With anybody. That's the goal. Yeah, and that's what you guys have done. You continue to add other payer sources, because the last thing that we want to do is not be able to help someone. Yeah. That's why our admissions team and ourselves will spend 3 hours getting them over to your place. Right? Because that is the name of the game, dude. And again, just like burning bridges, it's the same thing, dude. Clients all talk, other owners all talk. If you lead with your heart and you do things the right way, you won't be tripping over pennies.
Yeah.
Right? And so ultimately, the same kind of thing with Desert Recovery Centers, and that's why having you on the show, being able to couple with a PHP, being able to couple with an IOP, because it breaks our heart 27, 30 days, 21 days, where now we have to step them down, and, you know, they're still suicidal, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why we have to have other community programs like yourself, where we know that when we send them over there, it's a real program. It's got the staff, and they're going to continue with the treatment plan that's already been started.
Yeah.
So it's just been an honor and a blessing to have you on the show today. Ron, where can they find us if they want to get in touch?
DesertRecoveryCenters.com, Instagram, you know, all the social media platforms, Facebook, Desert Recovery Centers. Check out the alumni on Facebook. Jason and Sarah, Ronnie No Matter What, Ron Alessi on TikTok. It was a pleasure getting to meet you. And I just want to let you know the connection. You know, we were talking about the connection and all the things that happened, and what, you know, how that affected you and him and me. But there was a connection in this room today. Mm-hmm. And well done, man. Well done. You're doing great things. And I'm looking forward to seeing what the future holds for Hope and Healing.
Yeah, and I've heard the name so much, dude.
Me
like
too.
I've heard the name, and there's a bunch of guys that shout out to Johnny booking some of the amazing guests that we've had. And these are like all the guys I know everybody's name, because you guys have been doing this shit in the recovery community for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And now to have the time to get to know you, to have you a part of our circle of friendship and community partners, it just means a whole hell of a lot to me. And if anyone is desperately in need and you need help, mental health, substance abuse, you need to talk to anybody, it doesn't matter what level of care. If you need a sober living, it doesn't matter. Call Hope and Healing Addiction Treatment Centers. Call Desert Recovery Centers. We will not stop until we found you a place.
Yeah.
So, Mike, thanks for being on the show again today. Thanks for spreading hope, doing your part in the community, and being on our team, man. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah,
Thank you guys.